The agonized screams that pierced the dark Evora night would awaken a sleeping beast within humanity. 16-year-old Mira's brutal public execution for a trivial infraction was the last spark needed to ignite the flames of human rebellion against the oppressive alien regime that had crushed Earth and its colonies for centuries. When news of Mira's unjust death reached her home planet, shock and outrage rippled through the downtrodden human populace. Under the technologically superior Evora Empire's iron-fisted rule, humans were treated as inferior, expendable subjects. But this latest atrocity was one cruelty too many. For Andrew Taylor, a former space naval captain haunted by the ghosts of humanity's last disastrous war with the Evora, Mira's murder hit especially hard. Mira was his beloved niece, the orphaned daughter of Andrew's brother, who fell in battle against the vicious alien foe. Andrew had helped raise Mira after the conflict claimed her father's life. Now, the uniquely sharp pains of grief and fury raged in Andrew's heart, igniting a deep need for justice and vengeance against the Evora. In hidden corners and secret rooms, Andrew gathered with other human resistance leaders, desperate for a way to strike back at their alien overlords. But options were few. The Evora watched humanity's every move, severely limiting their ability to fight back. In the last human-Evora war, Earth's military might was decimated, reduced to a mere shadow of its former strength. Any attempts to rebuild their armed forces would surely be detected and mercilessly crushed before a single shot could be fired. But a spark of hope still remained. Whispers of a long-lost human war fleet, a powerful arsenal of ships hidden away in the uncharted depths of space after humanity's previous defeat. Waiting in the void, anticipating the signal to return and lead humanity's liberation from the Evora's suffocating hold. Most considered it nothing more than a legend, a futile dream. For Andrew, it was the last chance to save his species from the Evora's tightening noose. With grim resolve, Andrew stepped forward to volunteer for the immensely dangerous mission to locate this fleet of ghost ships, escape from Earth, navigate the deadly perils of Evora-controlled space, find the lost warships, if they even truly existed, all while staying one step ahead of the Evora's hunting forces, especially Commander Keed, a particularly ruthless alien leader who harbored a personal vendetta against Andrew from the last war. As Andrew raced to embark on this desperate quest, the Evora's chokehold on humanity only tightened further in the wake of Mira's execution and spreading unrest. More and more civilians, even children, were rounded up and shipped off to brutal work camps. Remote human colonies found themselves stripped bare as the Evora plundered their dwindling resources to feed the ravenous maw of the alien war machine. The pressure built to a breaking point, with all of humanity's hopes for freedom and survival now riding on Andrew's shoulders. If he failed to find those lost ships, it could very well spell the end of human resistance against the Evora forever. The stakes have never been higher. The fate of humanity itself now hangs in the balance, the future to be decided in a desperate gambit played out across the stars. The Evora killed an innocent young girl, and humanity's response is to roll the dice on an all-or-nothing mission to unleash an ancient war fleet against the galaxy's tyrants. It's humanity's final chance to roar back from the brink of total subjugation, or burn out in one last blaze of defiance. Will Andrew find the lost ships and with them the key to human liberation? Or will the embers of hope be snuffed out once and for all under the Evora's armored heel? The clock is ticking. Andrew's hands shook as he punched commands into the console of his tiny spacecraft, urging it to break free of Earth's gravity well. Sweat trickled down his brow. He knew every second counted. The encoded star map, humanity's last desperate hope, glowed on the display before him. The ship rattled as it clawed its way out of the atmosphere, the rumble of the engines filling the cramped cockpit. Andrew's heart raced. He was really doing this, abandoning Earth, his home, on a mission that could decide the fate of his entire species. Proximity alerts suddenly blared, red lights flashing. Evora Patrol, bearing 227.4. The computer's tinny voice warned. Shit! Andrew glanced at the sensor readout. An Evora warship, dripping with weapons, was angling towards him, fast. He wrenched the controls, sending his ship into a stomach-churning dive. The inertial dampeners struggled to keep up as he jinked and rolled. Plasma bolts sizzled past, barely missing. Andrew yanked the hyperdrive lever. The stars elongated into streaks as his ship leaped into faster-than-light speeds. He exhaled heavily, hands still gripping the controls. That had been too close. Light years away, in the obsidian-walled command post of the Evora fleet, Commander Kyde snarled as a subordinate delivered an unexpected report. An unscheduled human ship just broke orbit? Headed where? The subordinate consulted his records. Trajectory indicates the far reaches, Commander. Kyde's eyes narrowed. The far reaches? There's nothing out. He broke off, a sudden realization hitting him. No, it can't be. Show me that ship's warp signature. A few inputs later, the signature appeared on the screens. Kyde growled in recognition, clenching his fists. Andrew, so you finally made your move, human. He spun to his crew. Alert the Emperor and get my destroyer ready, immediately. Kyde stomped towards the doors, mind whirling with dark thoughts. I don't know what you're up to, Andrew, but I will find you, and I will end you once and for all. As Andrew hurtled through the swirling mists of the hyperlane, a chime from the long-range sensors jolted him to alertness. He leaned forward, eyes widening at the reading. An Evora destroyer? How did they find me so fast? A second later, the ship shuddered as a plasma blast slammed into the rear shields. Andrew cursed. The destroyer had his range. More shots followed, battering his small craft. Warning lights flashed, shield strength dropping rapidly. Andrew scanned the star map, searching desperately for anything that could save him. There, a dense nebula close by. With its ionized gases and radiation, it would play havoc with sensors and tracking. He veered hard, racing for the nebula's swirling blue and violet clouds. The destroyer stayed right on his tail, pummeling his shields. Alarms shrieked as Andrew plunged into the nebula's writhing tendrils. Visibility dropped to almost zero, the dense gases blocking everything. Even better, the ionized particles scrambled sensors, the displays dissolving into static. Andrew flew blind, relying on instinct. Somewhere out there, Kyde hunted him. But in here, his small ship was the needle to the destroyer's haystack. Or so he hoped. A burst of plasma sizzled past his cockpit. The destroyer was firing wildly, trying to flush him out or get lucky. Andrew jinked and twisted, weaving a random path. Think. He needed a plan. The nebula was keeping him alive, but he couldn't hide forever. Then it hit him. Risky, but it might just work. Andrew cut his engines, letting the ship drift dead in space, invisible now to sensors. He held his breath, tracking the destroyer's approximate location as it lumbered past. Closer, closer, almost now! Andrew slammed the throttle open, his ship leaping forward as he unleashed his meager weapons. Pulse lasers and kinetic rounds hammered into the destroyer's unshielded flank at point-blank range. One of the kinetic slugs found a weak point, an engine coupling. The destroyer lurched as explosions rippled across its hull. It began to drift, propulsion disabled. Andrew punched the hyperdrive and rocketed out of the nebula, not waiting around to admire his handiwork. He knew it wouldn't stop Kyde for long. And Kyde would be coming. Now, more than ever. The Evora knew his mission. They would stop at nothing to keep the lost human fleet from being found. Andrew took a deep breath and brought up the star map, plotting his next jump to the coordinates it indicated. Even with the head start he'd bought himself, the way ahead looked more dangerous than ever. But he had to try. For Mira, for the rest of the human race crushed under the Evora's boot. Those ships were their only chance. He refused to consider the alternative, that the fleet might not exist at all. Andrew's small ship sailed on into the void, towards whatever perils and possibilities awaited, towards a future where humanity would submit no more, or have no future at all. Light years behind, Cade stood seething on his crippled destroyer's bridge as repair crews rushed about. "You may have outplayed me this once, human," he muttered darkly. "But this is only the beginning." Straightening his armored uniform, Cade turned to his crew. "Inform the Emperor I am commandeering the fleet. We are going after Andrew Taylor." He gazed out the viewport at the infinite star field, eyes cold and merciless. "Run far and fast, Andrew. It won't matter. I will hunt you to the end of the universe if I must. You and the human resistance end now." As the destroyer limped back into warp, Cade allowed himself a cruel smile. The final defeat of humanity, long overdue, was finally at hand. He would make it so, or die in the attempt. Andrew's tiny ship hurtled through the inky void, stars streaking past as he followed the encoded map deeper into uncharted space. The vastness of the universe pressed in around him, a suffocating emptiness that seemed to go on forever. His sensors pinged, startling him from his thoughts. "What the hell?" Andrew leaned forward, squinting at the readout. An enormous structure loomed ahead, orbiting a dying red star. As he drew closer, his jaw dropped. It was unmistakably human in design, a colossal space station easily dwarfing anything Earth had built in centuries. But it was old, its hull pitted and scarred by millennia adrift in the void. Andrew's hands shook as he guided his ship towards a docking port. The airlock creaked open, revealing dusty corridors lit only by his suit's helmet lamp. His footsteps echoed through empty halls as he made his way to the command center. After some fiddling, he managed to coax a flicker of life from the ancient computers. Data scrolled across the screen, much of it corrupted beyond recognition, but what he could read made his heart race. This was it, he breathed, the rallying point for Earth's survivors after the war. He dug deeper, finding fragmented references to secret outposts and something called the reforging. It seemed the fleet hadn't just gone into hiding, they were planning something big. A way to strike back at the Evora. Suddenly alarms blared. Andrew's blood ran cold as he saw the reason. An Evora warship had entered the system. Cade's flagship. Shit! Andrew grabbed what data he could and sprinted for his ship. The station rocked as the first salvo of plasma fire struck. He strapped in and fired up the engines, rocketing away from the doomed station. His ship shuddered as the shockwave from the exploding station slammed into it. Alarms wailed. The hyperdrive was damaged. With Cade in hot pursuit, Andrew limped towards the nearest set of coordinates from the station's databanks. He found himself orbiting a frozen world, scanners revealing a hidden underground base. Inside, he discovered more pieces of the puzzle. The lost fleet was being upgraded with experimental tech, including a phasic cloaking device that could hide them even from Evora sensors. A crackling transmission suddenly came through. An older man with steely eyes appeared on screen. "This is Admiral Voss of the Human Resistance Fleet. We've been monitoring your progress, Captain Taylor. The fleet is nearly ready, but we need the final cloaking device components hidden at your location." Before Andrew could respond, the transmission cut out. Proximity alarms screamed to life. Cade's forces had found him. The base rocked as orbital bombardment began. Andrew cursed, grabbing the cloaking components and racing to the armory. He strapped on a suit of powered armor, checking the weapon systems. "All right, you alien bastards," he growled. "Let's dance." Explosions echoed through the base as Andrew charged towards the hangar, determined to deliver humanity's last hope, whatever it takes. The base shuddered as another volley of plasma fire slammed into it from orbit. Andrew sprinted through collapsing corridors, the powered exoskeleton suit amplifying his speed and strength. He snatched up the phasic cloaking components, tucking them securely into the armor's storage compartment. "Warning, hull breach detected. Evora forces entering Sector 7. The base's AI intoned calmly. Andrew rounded a corner and came face to face with a squad of Evora troops. Their insectoid faces twisted in surprise behind their helmets. Before they could react, Andrew's arm cannons roared to life. Hyper-accelerated rounds tore through the alien's armor seamlessly. He didn't stop to admire his handiwork, already charging towards the hangar. More Evora poured in through breaches in the base. Andrew's suit sensors lit up with incoming fire. He dove and rolled, the exoskeleton allowing him to move with inhuman speed and grace. Bursting into the hangar, Andrew's eyes locked onto his ship. It was battered, but intact. He sprinted for it, praying the engines would start. A crackling sound filled the air. Andrew spun to see Commander Keed materialize with a squad of elite commandos, their armor gleaming wickedly. "Taylor," Keed's voice boomed, "surrender now and I'll make your death quick." Andrew's response came in the form of a barrage of shoulder-mounted missiles. The Evora scattered, but two weren't fast enough. Their screams were cut short as the explosions turned them to ash. The hangar erupted into chaos. Plasma bolts and kinetic rounds crisscrossed the air. Andrew's exoskeleton moved with fluid precision, targeting systems locking onto Evora after Evora. His arm cannons spat death, while wrist-mounted flamethrowers sent gouts of burning chemicals washing over the aliens. An Evora commando charged, energy blade humming. Andrew met the attack head-on, the powered armor amplifying his strength. He caught the alien's wrist, crushing it. The commando howled in pain before a point-blank blast from Andrew's chest cannon vaporized its torso. Andrew fought like a man possessed, his fury at years of oppression fueling every move. Evora bodies littered the hangar floor. Equipment sparked and burned. Warning klaxons blared as the orbital bombardment intensified. He was almost to his ship when something slammed into him from behind. A grappling line had snaked around his waist. Andrew turned to see Keed, eyes burning with hatred. "I have you now, human," Keed snarled, yanking Andrew towards him. They collided with bone-jarring force. Andrew's armor creaked under the strain as Keed's superior bulk bore down on him. They grappled furiously, crashing through crates and machinery. Keed slammed Andrew into a support pillar. The human's vision swam, but he refused to yield. He headbutted Keed, the satisfying crunch of the alien's exoskeleton filling him with savage joy. "This is for Earth," Andrew roared, unleashing a flurry of armored punches. "This is for Mira!" Keed staggered under the assault. Andrew pressed his advantage, letting his rage fuel every strike. The Evora commander's defenses crumbled. With a final thunderous blow, Andrew sent Keed crashing to the deck. The alien's eyes rolled back as consciousness fled. Panting heavily, Andrew staggered to his feet. The hangar was coming apart around him. He stumbled to his ship, practically falling into the cockpit. The engines roared to life as Andrew's fingers danced across the controls. With a deafening crack, he blasted the bay doors open. His ship rocketed into space just as the outpost erupted in a massive fireball. Andrew allowed himself a moment to breathe as he punched in the coordinates for the rendezvous point. The hyperdrive hummed to life, stars stretching into streaks of light. Thanks to the FACEIT cloak components, no Evora ships would be able to track him. After what felt like an eternity, Andrew's ship dropped out of hyperspace. His jaw dropped at the sight before him. Dozens of warships hung in the void, some ancient behemoths from humanity's golden age, others sleek prototypes jam-packed with experimental weapons. A transmission crackled through. "Unidentified vessel, this is the UNS Leonidas. State your business." "This is Andrew Taylor," he replied, voice hoarse. "I have the final components for Project Lazarus." There was a pause, then, "Confirmed, Captain Taylor. Welcome home." As Andrew's ship was guided into the Leonidas's cavernous hangar, he felt a weight lift from his shoulders. They had a chance now, a real chance to take the fight to the Evora. The hangar was a hive of activity as Andrew disembarked. Crews swarmed over ships, making final preparations. In the distance, he could see the massive forms of city-sized factory ships, churning out munitions and spare parts. A grizzled man in an admiral's uniform strode towards him, flanked by aides. "Captain Taylor," he said, extending a hand. "Admiral Voss, I can't tell you how glad we are to see you in one piece." Andrew handed over the FACEIT cloak components. "It was a close call, sir, but we're ready now." Voss nodded grimly. "That we are, son. That we are." He turned to his staff. "Begin final integration of the cloaking systems and set a course for Earth." The Admiral's eyes blazed. It's time we showed the Evora what happens when you push humanity too far. As Andrew watched the bustle of activity around him, he felt a fierce pride. This was more than a resistance now. This was an armada capable of going toe-to-toe with the Evora war machine. Across the vast distances of space on the Evora homeworld, sensor operators frowned at their displays. Something was wrong. Impossible readings flickered across their screens, ghost signatures of ships that couldn't be there. In system after system, the same anomalous readings appeared, like ripples in a pond, spreading outward, undetectable, unstoppable. Humanity was coming, and this time they were bringing the thunder. Admiral Voss stood on the bridge of the UNS Leonidas, his weathered face illuminated by the holographic display of Evora-controlled space. He tapped a series of commands, and red markers bloomed across the map. "Gentlemen, these are our primary targets," Voss announced to his assembled officers. "Shipyards, munitions factories, fuel depots. We hit them hard, we hit them fast, and we vanish before they know what happened." Andrew Taylor nodded, studying the tactical overlay. "The resistance cells have provided us with detailed schematics of these facilities. We can exploit their weaknesses, maximize damage with minimal risk to our forces." Voss clapped Andrew on the shoulder. "Exactly, Captain. You'll lead the spearhead aboard the Leonidas. I want you to coordinate with our ground teams, ensure we're striking where it hurts most." The fleet moved out, ships sliding into formation before winking out of sight as their phasic cloaks engaged. Andrew felt a thrill of anticipation as the Leonidas approached its first target, a massive Evora shipyard orbiting a gas giant. "All hands battle stations," Andrew ordered, his voice steady. "Weapons, target their primary reactor and fabrication nodes. We take those out, this whole facility goes dark." The Leonidas decloaked mere kilometers from the shipyard. Before the Evora could react, lances of coherent light sliced through their defenses. Explosions blossomed silently in the vacuum of space as key systems were vaporized. Andrew watched the destruction unfold, his eyes hardened. Confirmed target neutralized, recloaking in 10 seconds. As quickly as they had appeared, the human ships vanished once more. They left chaos in their wake, crippled Evora vessels drifting helplessly, vital infrastructure reduced to cooling debris. This scene played out again and again across Evora space. Human strike groups materialized from nowhere, unleashing devastating attacks before melting away. Supply convoys found themselves ambushed by phantom ships. Munitions depots erupted in spectacular chain reactions as precise strikes ignited their volatile contents. On the Evora homeworld, Commander Kide jerked awake in a medical pod, his chitinous hide still bearing the scars of his battle with Andrew. He roared in fury, ripping monitoring devices from his carapace. "Status report," he snarled at the nearest technician. The underling's antennae quivered nervously. "Commander, we've suffered multiple attacks across..." Keed seized the hapless Evora by the throat. "How? Where did they come from?" "Unknown, sir," the technician gasped. "Our sensors detect nothing until it's too late." Keed flung the technician aside and stormed from the medical bay, ignoring the protests of the medical staff. He burst into the Emperor's throne room, interrupting a gathering of high-ranking officials. "Your Majesty," Keed growled, dropping to one knee. "The humans have struck again. We must mobilize every ship, every soldier, crush this insurgency before it spreads further." The Emperor's compound eyes narrowed. "You overstep, Commander. These are mere pinpricks, hardly worth..." A junior officer burst into the chamber, mandibles clicking in agitation. "Forgive the intrusion, but we've just lost contact with the Nathkrill shipyards. The entire facility. It's gone." Silence fell over the assembled Evora. The Emperor's exoskeleton paled visibly. "Very well, Commander Keed," the Emperor said quietly. "You have full authority. Find these humans and exterminate them, whatever the cost." As the Evora scrambled to respond, the human fleet pressed its advantage. Andrew stood on the bridge of the Leonidas, watching tactical displays as human warships rained devastation on Evora ground fortifications. "Sir," his XO reported. "We're receiving transmissions from resistance cells on multiple worlds. They're rising up, hitting the Evora while they're reeling." Andrew nodded grimly. "Good. It's time we brought this fight planet side. Set course for New Eden Colony. We're going home." The Leonidas led a task force of dropships and gunships towards the familiar blue-green orb of Andrew's homeworld. As they entered the atmosphere, Evora anti-aircraft batteries opened fire. Energy bolts and missiles streaked skyward. "Evasive maneuvers," Andrew ordered. The Leonidas corkscrewed through the air, its point defense lasers picking off incoming projectiles. "Gunships, take out those emplacements." Human fighters screamed past, unleashing salvos of missiles that reduced Evora fortifications to smoking craters. On the ground, resistance fighters emerged from hiding, assaulting Evora positions with a fury born of years of oppression. Andrew's dropship touched down in the outskirts of the colony's capital. He led a strike team through rubble-strewn streets, the sounds of battle echoing all around them. They fought their way block by block, liberating pockets of human survivors and eliminating Evora strongpoints. As they neared the city center, a massive Evora tank rumbled into view, its main cannon traversing towards them. Andrew's team scattered, diving for cover as the tank's shot obliterated a nearby building. "Jackson, Ramirez," Andrew shouted. "Flank it! Everyone else, suppressing fire." Andrew popped up from behind a shattered wall, his rifle spitting hypervelocity rounds that pinged harmlessly off the tank's armor. But it kept the Evora gunner's attention focused on him while his team maneuvered into position. With a thunderous boom, a shoulder-launched anti-tank missile streaked from Jackson's position. It struck the Evora vehicle dead center, turning it into a funeral pyre for its alien crew. They pressed on, fighting their way into the colony's administrative complex. Andrew's armor was scorched and dented, his breath coming in ragged gasps as they cleared room after room. Suddenly, a massive Evora in ornate battle armor stepped into view. Andrew recognized the elaborate insignia. This was Jorvan, the butcher who had overseen the colony's enslavement. "Taylor," Jorvan's translator crackled. "I was wondering when you'd crawl back here." Andrew raised his rifle. "It's over, Jorvan. Surrender, and you might live to see a prison cell." Jorvan's mandibles clicked in amusement. "Foolish human, you've merely stirred the hive. The full might of the Imperium will crush you and your pathetic resistance." With blinding speed, Jorvan brought up his own weapon, a wicked alien device that crackled with energy. Andrew dove aside as a bolt of plasma seared past him, melting through the wall behind. They exchanged fire, darting from cover to cover in a deadly dance. Andrew's armor warning systems screamed as a near miss from Jorvan's weapon overloaded his shields. Gritting his teeth against the pain of burns along his side, Andrew rolled to his feet and charged. He slammed into Jorvan with bone-jarring force, using his armor's enhanced strength to grapple with the larger alien. They crashed through a window, tumbling onto a wide balcony overlooking the war-torn city. Andrew's fist connected with Jorvan's face, cracking the alien's exoskeleton. Jorvan retaliated with a vicious knee strike that left Andrew gasping for air. Jorvan seized Andrew by the throat, lifting him off his feet. "I will mount your head on a spike," the Evora snarled. "A warning to all who dare defy us." Andrew's vision began to darken as Jorvan's grip tightened. With the last of his strength, he triggered his armor's built-in defibrillator. The electrical surge coursed through both of them. Jorvan shrieked in pain, his grip loosening. Andrew broke free, snatching up his fallen rifle. Before the Evora commander could recover, Andrew unleashed a full burst into Jorvan's chest at point-blank range. The alien's corpse toppled from the balcony, landing with a sickening crunch on the rubble-strewn street below. Andrew sagged against the railing, every nerve screaming in agony. He keyed his comm. "This is Taylor. The administrative complex is secure. Jorvan is down." Cheers erupted over the channel as the news spread. All across the city, Evora forces were throwing down their weapons, their will to fight broken by the loss of their commander. Andrew stumbled back inside, leaving a trail of blood. He made it halfway across the room before his legs gave out. As darkness closed in around him, he heard the pounding of boots and urgent voices. Captain's hit. We need a medic here now. Andrew tried to speak, to tell them to leave him and secure the rest of the complex, but unconsciousness claimed him before he could form the words. He awoke sometime later in the Leonidas medbay, his body a mass of pain beneath layers of bandages and regenerative gel. Admiral Voss stood at his bedside, his expression grim. "Welcome back to the land of the living, son," Voss said. "You did good down there, real good." Andrew tried to sit up, wincing at the effort. "The colony? Did we?" Voss held up a hand. "We liberated it, for now, but we've got a problem, a big one." He activated a holographic display showing a massive Evora fleet en route to the system. "They're throwing everything they have at us," Voss continued. "We've bloodied their nose, but now the real fight begins. We need to fall back, regroup, hit their core worlds while they're overextended." Andrew's fists clenched. "We can't abandon the colony. Not again." Voss's eyes softened. "We're not abandoning them, Andrew. We're leaving resistance cells in place, giving them the tools to keep fighting. But right now, we need you and this fleet intact if we're going to win this war." Andrew nodded reluctantly. He knew Voss was right, but it didn't make the decision any easier. As the human fleet prepared to withdraw, Andrew watched from his hospital bed as boats full of liberated colonists were brought aboard. Their faces were a mix of hope and fear, joy at their freedom tinged with uncertainty about the future. The Leonidas shuddered as it broke orbit, cloaking systems engaged. Andrew closed his eyes, silently vowing to return. This was just the beginning. The real war was about to begin. The human fleet materialized in deep space, the stars around them unfamiliar and cold. Andrew stood on the bridge of the Leonidas, his body still aching from the wounds sustained on New Eden. The tactical display showed a sea of friendly contacts, the combined might of humanity's reforged armada. Admiral Voss's voice crackled over the comms. "All ships, maintain radio silence. We have a brief window before the Evora can regroup. Our next target is Corvus." Andrew studied the holographic projection of their objective. Corvus loomed large, a moon transformed into a vast shipyard, its surface filled with construction gantries and defense platforms. "That's where they're building their new fleets," Andrew muttered. "Take it out, and we cripple their war machine." Voss nodded grimly. "Exactly. Half our ships will decloak and hammer their defenses from long range. Ground teams will then move in to finish the job." Andrew's fists clenched. "I'll lead one of those teams." The ship's doctor, her face creased with concern, stepped forward. "Captain, you're in no condition for combat. Your injuries—" "We'll have to wait," Andrew cut her off. He met Voss's gaze. "I'm going down there, sir." Voss studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "Very well. Suit up." Minutes later, Andrew stood in the armory as technicians helped him into his powered armor. Each movement sent spikes of pain through his barely healed body, but he gritted his teeth and endured. The familiar weight of the armor settled around him, systems coming online with a soft hum. The fleet dropped out of warp, cloaking devices engaged. Andrew strapped himself into a dropship alongside his strike team. The air was thick with tension as they waited for the signal to deploy. Suddenly, space outside their viewports lit up as the human ships decloaked. Lances of energy and swarms of missiles streaked towards Corvus. The shipyard's defenses, caught unprepared, crumbled under the onslaught. Half-built Evora warships shattered, their unfinished hulls splitting apart in silent explosions. "Go, go, go!" the dropship pilot shouted. They rocketed towards the surface, weaving through debris fields and streams of plasma fire. Anti-aircraft batteries opened up, filling the sky with deadly light. A nearby dropship vanished in a ball of flame. Andrew's grip tightened on his weapon as they plunged into Corvus's thin atmosphere. The dropship's hull glowed red-hot from the friction. With a bone-jarring impact, they touched down amidst the chaos of the shipyard. The instant the ramp lowered, Andrew charged out. His team fanned out behind him, laying down, suppressing fire. Evora's security forces scrambled to mount a defense, but they were hopelessly outmatched. A massive Evora battlewalker stomped into view, its weapon ports glowing with building energy. Andrew's team scattered as it opened fire, slagging the ground where they'd stood moments before. "Jackson, hit it with the launcher!" Andrew bellowed. A streak of light erupted from his team's position. The missile struck the walker's leg joint, sending it toppling. As it crashed to the ground, Andrew's squad poured fire into its vulnerable underside until it stopped moving. They fought their way through the shipyard, neutralizing pockets of resistance. Alarms blared as they approached the Central Command nexus. Andrew's HUD lit up with warnings as Evora starfighters screamed overhead, strafing their position. "Push forward," Andrew shouted. "We need to take that command center." They breached the final set of blast doors, cutting down the guards within. Andrew's eyes locked onto a figure at the far end of the room, an Evora in elaborate battle armor. "Karas!" Andrew snarled, recognizing the sadistic admiral from intelligence briefings. Karas's mandibles clicked in amusement. "The infamous Andrew Taylor. How good of you to deliver yourself to me." Without warning, Karas lunged forward with shocking speed. Andrew barely managed to raise his weapon before the Evora slammed into him. They grappled, crashing through consoles and equipment. Andrew's wounds screamed in protest as Kuras's powerful limbs threatened to crush his armor. He headbutted the alien, cracking its chitinous faceplate. Kuras staggered back, giving Andrew the opening he needed. He unleashed a flurry of armored punches, driving Kuras back step by step. The Evora's taunts turned to gasps of pain as Andrew's assault battered through its defenses. With a final crushing blow, Andrew sent Kuras sprawling. The Evora admiral lay still, unconscious or dead. Suddenly, the entire facility shook. Andrew's comms crackled to life. "All teams, evac now. We've breached their main fuel reserves. This whole place is going up." Andrew sprinted for the exit, his team close behind. They piled into their dropship as massive explosions began to consume the shipyard. As they rocketed away from Corvus, Andrew watched fireballs engulf the docks. Incomplete Evora warships, representing years of production, were reduced to twisted scrap in moments. Back aboard the Leonidas, Andrew allowed himself a moment of grim satisfaction as he watched Corvus burn. But Admiral Voss's expression was troubled. "We struck a major blow today," Voss said quietly. "But intercepted communications suggest Kaid was expecting this. He's deployed some kind of new anti-cloaking technology." Andrew's blood ran cold. "You mean?" Voss nodded grimly. "Our greatest advantage may be gone, and Kaid's built a secret armada to hunt us down." As alarms began to sound throughout the human fleet, Andrew realized their war of liberation had entered a dangerous new phase. The real test was yet to come. The bridge of the Leonidas shuddered as another electromagnetic surge washed over the ship. Admiral Voss gripped the command console, his eyes fixed on the tactical display. "Evasive pattern delta," he barked. "All ships maintain formation." The human fleet plunged deeper into the Velara Nebula, vast clouds of luminescent gas swirling around their hulls. Crackling tendrils of energy lashed out, playing havoc with sensors and comms. "Sir," the comms officer called out, "we're losing contact with Captain Taylor's carrier group." Voss's face hardened. "Keep trying. We can't afford to lose them in this mess." Aboard his carrier, the Indomitable, Andrew Taylor fought to keep his ship under control as systems flickered and died around him. "Reactors destabilizing," his chief engineer reported. "These EM surges are tearing us apart." Andrew opened his mouth to respond when a proximity alarm screamed to life. Through the swirling nebula, the sleek forms of Evora warships materialized. "Evasive action," Andrew shouted. "Launch all fighters." The Indomitable banked hard, narrowly avoiding a barrage of plasma fire. Human fighters poured from its launch bays, engaging the Evora interceptors in a frenzied dogfight. Andrew's tactical officer swore. "Sir, they're picking us up through our cloaks." On the main view screen, Andrew watched as more Evora ships emerged from the nebula's roiling gases. At their center loomed a massive dreadnought, Kaid's flagship. "All ships, break formation," Andrew ordered. "Use the nebula for cover. We need to buy time." The human carriers scattered, weaving through the electromagnetic storm. Andrew's hands flew over his console, plotting an intercept course with Keed's vessel. "Sir, what are you doing?" his XO asked, eyes wide. Andrew's voice was cold steel. "We're going to ram that bastard." The Indomitable's engines roared to life, propelling the carrier straight at Keed's flagship. Evora fire intensified, scoring hits along the carrier's hull. "Brace for impact!" Andrew bellowed. With a bone-jarring crash, the Indomitable's reinforced prow slammed into Keed's ship. Armor buckled and bent as the two Leviathans ground against each other. Alarms blared throughout the human vessel. "Hull breach on decks 3 through 7, the damage control officer reported. "We're venting atmosphere." But the gambit had worked. Andrew watched with grim satisfaction as Kaid's sensors arrays crumpled under the impact. "All ships pull back," he ordered. "Regroup at Rally Point Sigma." As the battered human fleet withdrew, Andrew surveyed the damage. Half his fighters were gone, and the Indomitable was barely holding together, but they'd bloodied Kaid's nose. Long-range scans showed the rest of the Evora armada closing in. Andrew knew they couldn't survive another engagement. "This is Captain Taylor to all ships," he broadcast. "Initiate dispersal plan Omega. Good luck and Godspeed." One by one, the surviving human vessels vanished into the nebula, each on a randomized vector. Andrew watched them go, knowing he'd likely never see them again. "Helm, set course for the heart of the nebula," he ordered. "We're going to draw them off." The Indomitable limped forward, trailing debris and venting plasma. Behind them, Cade's juggernaut gave chase. Andrew stood on his ruined bridge, watching the Evora fleet close in. He allowed himself a small smile. They'd given the others a chance. Now it was time to make their final stand count. "All hands," he called out. "Prepare for close-quarters combat." The Indomitable's engines flared one last time as they plunged into the teeth of the Evora formation. Andrew's fingers tightened on the arms of his command chair as the space around them erupted in fire. The shockwave from the Indomitable's final stand rippled through the Valara Nebula, scattering the remnants of the human fleet. Admiral Voss stood on the bridge of the Leonidas, his face etched with grim willpower as he watched the tactical display. "Status report," he barked. His XO, Commander Chen, stepped forward. "Sir, we've lost contact with Captain Taylor's group. The rest of the fleet is scattered across 3 sectors. Voss nodded, his mind racing. "Begin regrouping procedures. Rendezvous at emergency coordinates Alpha, Beta, and Gamma." As the hours ticked by, battered human ships limped into the designated staging areas. Voss pored over damage reports and casualty lists, the weight of command heavy on his shoulders. In a secure briefing room, Voss addressed his remaining captains via hologram. "The Evora have nullified our cloaking advantage, but we're not beaten yet. We're going to hit them where they least expect it." He outlined his plan, detailing the deployment of stealth frigates equipped with experimental tech. Captain Rodriguez, commanding one such vessel, leaned forward. "Sir, these sensor bafflers haven't been combat tested. We'll be flying blind." "That's the point, Rodriguez," Voss replied. "We need to confuse their sensors, give them ghosts to chase while we prepare our counterstrike." As the meeting concluded, Voss turned to his tactical officer. "Plot a course for the Crimson Dwarf system. There's an asteroid field there that'll serve our purposes." The human fleet slipped away, a handful of stealth frigates peeling off to begin their deception. Aboard the frigate Phantom, Rodriguez watched his sensor operator work. "Initiating Phantom Fleet Protocol," the young ensign reported. "Generating false warp signatures, now." Across multiple star systems, Evora sensor stations lit up with alerts. Kaid, aboard his flagship, snarled in frustration as reports flooded in of human fleet sightings. "Dispatch hunter-killer groups to each location," he ordered. "Find them." Meanwhile, the core of the human armada slipped into the shelter of the Crimson Dwarf's asteroid field. Voss stood on the Leonidas's observation deck, watching the rusty light of the dying star play across tumbling rocks. "Begin dispersal," he commanded. "I want our ships hidden throughout this maze." Days passed as the human fleet entrenched itself. Engineering teams worked around the clock, setting up interlocking fields of fire and sensor nets. Fighters conducted constant patrols, weaving through the asteroid maze. The trap was set. Now they waited. The stillness shattered as proximity alarms blared. An ensign's voice rang out. "Sir, Evora signatures detected on approach vector." Voss's eyes narrowed. "All ships maintain emission control. Let them come to us." Keed's flagship glided into the system, escorted by a formidable battle group. Their sensors swept the asteroid field, probing for any sign of their elusive foe. Voss's voice was cold steel as he gave the order, "Execute." In an instant, the quiet asteroid field erupted into furious action. Hundreds of human fighters poured from concealed hangars, swarming towards the Evora vanguard. Caught off guard, the alien ship struggled to bring their weapons to bear. The Leonidas surged forward, its main guns opening up with a thunderous barrage. Other human capital ships revealed themselves, turning the asteroid field into a gauntlet of punishing crossfire. Kaid bellowed orders as his fleet frantically tried to regroup, but in the chaos of tumbling asteroids and false sensor readings, coordination broke down. Human ships darted between floating rocks, striking hard before vanishing back into cover. A massive Evora cruiser, its hull pockmarked with torpedo hits, drifted into view of the Leonidas. Voss didn't hesitate. "All batteries fire!" The cruiser disappeared in a blinding flash as its reactor went critical. Voss allowed himself a grim smile. The tide was turning. As the battle raged on, the true extent of the human ambush became clear. Cade's vaunted anti-cloaking technology, so effective in open space, was all but useless in this cluttered maelstrom. With mounting desperation, Cade realized the trap had sprung shut. His flagship rocked as another salvo struck home. "Helm!" he roared. "Get us out of here!" The Evora dreadnought turned ponderously, its engines flaring as it fled the killing ground. What remained of its escort followed, leaving behind a trail of burning wreckage. Voss watched them go, his voice steady as he issued new orders. "All ships pursue and engage. Today we take the fight to them." The human fleet surged out of the asteroid field, harrying the retreating Evora ships. What had begun as an ambush transformed into a running battle across the star system. Aboard the Leonidas, Voss studied the tactical plot with fierce intensity. They had bloodied Kaid's nose, but the real test was yet to come. As reports of Evora ships breaking formation and scattering filled the comms, Voss knew their window of opportunity was opening. He turned to his XO, his eyes gleaming with purpose. "Prepare a briefing for all ship captains. It's time we discussed our next move, the heart of the Evora Empire itself." Admiral Voss stood on the bridge of the Leonidas, his eyes fixed on the tactical display. The human fleet's victory in the asteroid field had opened a narrow window of opportunity, and he intended to seize it. "All ships, prepare for Operation Thunderbolt," Voss commanded, his voice steady. "We strike at the heart of the Evora Empire." The crew bustled with nervous energy as they readied for the most audacious assault in human history. Voss had assembled an elite strike force around the Leonidas, leaving the bulk of the fleet to keep the Evora off balance in the outer territories. Captain Andrew Taylor strode onto the bridge, still bearing the scars of his near-fatal encounter with Keed's forces. Voss nodded in greeting. "Good to have you back, Captain," the Admiral said. "We'll need your expertise for what's coming." Andrew's face was a mask of cold focus. "Just point me at the enemy, sir." The strike force plunged into the first wormhole nexus, relying on intelligence from resistance cells to navigate the treacherous cosmic tunnels. Violent shudders racked the Leonidas as it fought against gravimetric forces threatening to tear it apart. "Hull integrity at 82%, an officer shouted over the din of straining metal. Andrew gripped a nearby console, steadying himself as the ship bucked and heaved. Through the view screen, he watched in awe as reality itself seemed to twist and fold around them. The fleet emerged into a pocket of calm between rifts, only to face a new peril. The wreckage of countless starships filled the void, victims of the wormhole's cruel physics. "Evasive maneuvers!" Voss barked as a massive hull fragment hurtled towards them. The Leonidas's engines roared, narrowly avoiding a collision, but smaller pieces of debris pelted the ship relentlessly, its experimental shielding flaring under the assault. After what felt like an eternity of navigating the cosmic labyrinth, the human strike force burst into real space within the Evora Empire's inner systems. They found themselves in the midst of chaos, Evora ships firing on each other as rebels clashed with loyalist forces. "Sir, we're picking up friendly Evora signatures," the tactical officer reported. "They're engaging the loyalists." Voss's eyes narrowed. "Good. Use the confusion to our advantage. All ships, integrate with the rebel forces and push for Korbask Prime." The human vessels slipped into formation alongside their unlikely Evora allies, exchanging fire with the loyalist ships. Plasma bolts and railgun rounds crisscrossed the void as the combined fleet smashed through the depleted defensive line, protecting the Evora homeworld. As they approached Korbask Prime, Andrew felt a chill run down his spine. The seat of Evora power loomed before them, its rings casting long shadows across the planet's surface. "Initiating docking clamp sequence," the helm officer announced. "Matching transponder codes, we're in." The human fleet glided silently into the orbital shadow of Korbask's rings, their stolen codes masking their approach. Voss's voice cut through the tense silence. "All ships, prepare for nuclear strike. Target military and defensive installations only." A hush fell over the bridge as the launch bays opened. Dozens of warheads streaked towards the Evora capital, leaving trails of fire in their wake. The planet's surface erupted in a series of blinding flashes as the nukes found their marks. "Marine units, prepare for planetfall," Voss ordered. "Captain Taylor, you have point." Andrew nodded, his teeth clenched as he headed for the drop bay. He climbed into his armored pod, joined by a squad of hardened veterans. As the bay doors opened, revealing the burning world below, Andrew allowed himself a grim smile. "Let's finish this," he growled. The pods plummeted through Korbask's atmosphere, streaking towards the Imperial District like vengeful meteors. They smashed into the ornate streets surrounding the palace, disgorging their cargo of human warriors. Andrew's armor servos whined as he burst from his pod, plasma rifle at the ready. All around him, chaos reigned. Evora security forces scrambled to mount a defense while panicked civilians fled in all directions. "Push for the palace!" Andrew shouted, leading his squad through the melee. They fought their way block by block, exchanging fire with Evora troops and battling through hastily erected barricades. The air filled with the acrid smell of burning metal and ozone as energy weapons discharged. At last, they reached the towering gates of the Imperial Palace. Andrew hefted a breaching charge, slapping it onto the ornate metal. "Fire in the hole!" he yelled, diving for cover. The explosion rocked the entire district, blowing the massive doors off their hinges. Andrew and his team surged forward, engaging the palace guard in vicious close-quarters combat. They fought their way deeper into the sprawling complex, descending into subterranean levels that seemed to stretch on forever. Andrew's heart pounded as they neared the command citadel, knowing his ultimate goal lay just beyond. With a final burst of gunfire, they breached the inner sanctum. Andrew's eyes widened as he took in the scene before him. The Evora Emperor stood imperiously atop a raised dais, flanked by cybernetically enhanced guards. And there, at the Emperor's right hand, stood the familiar figure of Keed. "Taylor!" Keed snarled, his hand tightening on his weapon. Andrew raised his rifle, hatred burning in his eyes. "This ends now." The room erupted into furious combat. Andrew's Marines engaged the Emperor's guards while he focused on Cade. They clashed in a blur of brutal hand-to-hand fighting, their grudge match reaching its final crescendo. Even as he fought for his life, Andrew couldn't help but marvel at the Emperor's inhuman speed and strength. The Evora ruler lashed out with telekinetic blasts that sent Marines flying across the room. Andrew ducked under Cade's swinging fist, countering with a vicious elbow strike. They grappled, neither willing to give an inch as the fate of two species hung in the balance. "You can't win this, human," Cade spat, his cybernetic eye glowing balefully. Andrew headbutted the Evora commander, drawing blood. "Watch me!" The battle raged on, Andrew pushing himself beyond his limits as he fought against opponents far beyond normal human capabilities. But with each passing moment, the tide began to turn. Human and rebel Evora reinforcements poured into the palace, slowly but surely overwhelming the loyalist forces. Andrew could hear the sounds of combat echoing from the floors above as the uprising spread throughout the capital. He locked eyes with the Evora Emperor, seeing a flicker of doubt cross the alien ruler's face. For the first time in millennia, the unthinkable had happened. The Evora homeworld was under siege, and their supposedly impregnable fortress was crumbling around them. Andrew redoubled his assault on Keed, driven by the memory of all those who had fallen in this long and brutal war. The two enemies circled each other, battered and bloodied but refusing to yield. "For Earth," Andrew growled. "For Mira." He launched himself at Kaid one final time, the fate of two civilizations hanging on the outcome of their personal vendetta.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.